Welcome to Podcapers, the official podcast of a place to hang your cape. And this week, oh my god, I'm actually joined by someone actually in the same room as me for once. I'm not alone anymore. Cue the music. Hello there, capers, and as I said, welcome to Podcapers, the official podcast of a place to hang your cape. My name's Scott James Merridew, and this is the show where I talk about various geek and nerd-related topics, and I'm joined each week by a very special different guest. And as I said, for once, I'm not doing an interview or whatever over Skype or something. I'm doing it in an actual room in Edinburgh with a place to hang your cape's go-to academic. It's Chelsi Slotten!
Hey everybody, it's great to be back, and I'm glad that I've apparently earned the title Go-To Academic.
Yeah, my go-to. I don't know any others. I don't run in academic circles. I'm not that kind of person. Many people might claim to be academics, but I'm sorry. Your collection of bootleg Thunderbirds tapes doesn't count, Fred. You know this. Your soul knows the truth. And now, Chelsi, right, so in addition to being the smartest person I know, outside of my dad, do not underestimate his intelligence, dear God, you are also a podcaster yourself.
Yes, yeah, so I am one of the co-hosts of the Women in Archaeology podcast, a podcast about, for, and by women in the field of archaeology, and we talk about everything from archaeological legislation to why the belief that aliens built the pyramids is bullshit to...
It was obviously the swamp monsters. We all know this. Wake up, sheeple!
Clearly, yes, the swamp monsters.
Working in conjunction with Bigfoot.
Yes, Bigfoot. Also a very real thing.
Yeah, we can't...
The Loch Ness Monster, however...
I mean, it's just complete and utter hokum. Come on. It doesn't live in Loch Ness. It lives in Lake Erie, obviously.
Obviously. We might have to have a discussion about this later. I'm a little more pro Loch Ness Monster and a little bit more anti-Bigfoot.
I think we can all agree that... See, it's tricky with the whole cryptid thing, because humanity is still discovering new species all the time. But like tiny frogs in the Amazon and tiny insects in outer Mongolia. So the Pacific Northwest, it's not exactly teeming with biodiversity nowadays.
No, it's not. But the archaeological evidence doesn't really support Bigfoot either. And as the resident academic, I like my facts.
I'll defer to you in that regard. I don't know. And so you talk about all those sorts of things, and it's very interesting. I'm told. I tried listening to it, but it all goes over my head. I'm not that bright, capers.
Yeah, and some of it's a little more academic than others. We did do a review of the most recent Tomb Raider movie.
Okay. Color me invested now.
One. We've talked about some pseudo-archaeological topics like Bigfoot and the pyramids and Atlantis. So that's also a fun episode that's maybe a little
Plato
less.
got drunk one night and came up with a great story.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Really good story, though.
Yeah. Was a really great story like, they really angered the gods, so the city sank, the end.
Pretty much.
And then Robert E. Howard came along. Do not confuse those two.
Do not confuse those two.
Jeez. No.
Very bad. But yeah, it's actually interesting that we bring up Atlantis because a lot of people have talked about the kind of relationship between some of the Greek myths and the superhero stories of today, right? The deities of the past who were all powerful but flawed, and the superheroes that we all know and love, many of whom are all powerful but also deeply flawed.
Like, for example, Thor dealing with problems with arrogance and familial relationships, and Superman dealing with the fact that, oh no, I had to snap one guy's neck despite the fact that I pretty much blew up the whole fucking city. You know, personal problems we can all relate to.
Yes, although some of them are a little bit more relatable. Trauma, right? That, for example, Batman is a classic case of watching his family be murdered in front of him, and ending up with PTSD. And kind of his journey to becoming Batman can be looked at through a lens of a journey of
psychological meltdown,
but also instead of post-traumatic stress disorder, post-traumatic growth.
This is the question, like when a character in any literary context has severe deep trauma in the past, is that character development, or is it a disorder that needs to be quote unquote fixed? I know that's not really how you do it in psychology or psychoanalysis, but still, for the purpose of this conversation, which is a very nice lead into our main topic of the evening, we are talking about the psychology of superheroes. Now, Chelsea, you're not a psychologist.
No, I am not a psychologist. I am an anthropologist.
And I'm neither of those. I'm neither a psychologist nor an anthropologist. I did, however, study psychology at A level. I did not do well, Capers. But I was told that I understood the material very well, but I'm not a good exam taker. Which means I'm stupid, basically. But
no, it doesn't. Many people are not good exam takers.
Yeah, so I'd like to think I know a little bit about the basics. No one's going to hire me to be a fucking therapist any day soon. But the psychology of characters always interests me. I like to go delve into that because I'm very much focused on character development and plot lines and things like that. And so I have thought about Batman from that lens. I'm sure that wasn't the authorial intent, but as we all know, author intent goes out the window the second the thing gets made. Death of the author. We're the author now, motherfucker. We decide what's going on, and we think Bruce Wayne fucked up. Okay? He dresses like a bat, he only goes out at night, and oh, what's this? A panel with him sleeping in the same bed as Robin. I'm never gonna let that go!
Fair. Well, it's interesting when you talk about intent because Batman's origin story wasn't told until I believe it's the 7th episode of the original Batman comic. So
issue.
Yes.
I know you're not. It's called an issue, not an episode.
That's fair. No, I'm in podcast brain. Podcast episodes. But the 7th issue. So why did they?
So I just pointed over to sharing the room with Chelsea and I is Chelsea's dog Spice, who's a little adorable thing who's currently kipping on the couch, and it's adorable. She's adorable.
She knows what's up.
I suppose she hasn't been completely utterly terrified. I can tell Chelsea is terrified by meeting me in person and seeing the full might of my rage. You can see the neck veins bulging, but Spice just doesn't give a fuck. Spice don't give a fuck.
No, you're interrupting, or potentially interrupting, important napping time. Wouldn't want to do that.
I'm so sorry, Spice.
It's not actually impacting her ability to nap, as you can see.
She's giving me a slight look like, do you mind? Come on, you can see what I'm doing. So we'll come back to Batman. Oh dear God, we'll come back to Batman. He's definitely going to pop up several times during this thing. So we're just going to talk about the general context of psychology in both individual superhero stories and their personal character journeys, but also in how it's impacted us as a society consuming this particular kind of media.
Sure. And that's really what I'm more interested in kind of as an anthropologist, right? We study culture and other human beings, so I'm less interested in kind of the individual psychological impact. As I said, not a psychologist, but anthropologists really love looking at the impact of different things on culture, so that's where I'm at. There's
lots of ways to look at it. Psychology has been described. So the problem is, as sciences go, it's kind of vague. Mm-hmm. It encompasses a lot of different topics and a lot of different theories, theorems, hypotheses, and methods of constructing, psychological operating systems. I'm just making up words as I go along. Because this is what I do, Capers. I'm not intelligent, so I make up long-sounding words to sound more intelligent. My secret revealed. And so there's lots of things we can talk about. So I think we should start from a historical context. And we all know the story about how comics were just they got started as penny dreadfuls and stuff, and then they could move on to pulp serials and things like that. And it wasn't until, it's big boom in the 40s with the whole propaganda thing. And that's when comics, in terms of portraying characters, were, shall we say, simplistic.
Little bit, yeah.
A lot bit.
But then you did see, starting in the 40s, some people who were kind of trying to make them more complicated. For example, Wonder Woman's creator, William Marston, who
Oh!
wasn't around for that long, but he was actually a psychologist and applied psychological theory to the creation of comics.
That's not all that he applied to the creation of comics. He incorporated a little, something else, a little, fetish.
A little bit.
A lot of it.
Yeah.
Every single cover had Wonder Woman in various bondage poses.
It did, yes.
There was, I know there was a deeper meaning behind it, and it was actually, exploring a deep, and we all know nothing wrong with bondage unless it comes in the form of 50 Shades of Grey, but
Consent is important.
consent is so fucking important. Oh my god, no one called her out on it! Team of editors working to correct the many spelling mistakes in the last draft of a fucking book that she wrote on a fucking BlackBerry, but no one thought, hey, E.L. James, maybe make it clear that she does in fact, want this and is fine with this, as opposed to sort of a...
That's debatable throughout literally the entire series, or at least the first 6 chapters, because I could not read more of it.
I haven't even tried. You know what? I gave Twilight a fucking chance. I read the first Twilight book because everyone's talking about this. I've seen the movies, they're shit. But you know what? Maybe the books are okay. Maybe something got lost in adaptation or translation. Maybe it's alright, and it's awful.
Pro tip.
Yeah?
I read the first 3 books right after I had my wisdom teeth taken out.
Oh!
Really enjoyed them. There may have been
Edward speaks to my soul. But I couldn't even give 50 Shades of Grey a chance. Actually, the first time, I've probably told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again. The first time I ever came to contact with 50 Shades of Grey, I'd heard the word a couple of times before. But at the time it was starting to get really popular. I was working in a bookshop in the Cotswolds, where my parents lived, in between, years in university, went to my undergrad. And this old lady walked into the shop. I said, hello. I was like, hello. I was wondering, do you have that new book, 50 Shades of Grey? I was like, oh, I've heard of that. Check it. No, we don't have that because we were a respectable bookshop that didn't peddle smut. And she was like, oh, never mind then. Don't worry about ordering it for me. It'll be fine. Goodbye. I was like, I kept saying to myself, I keep hearing about this 50 Shades of Grey thing. I've got to look it up. I went home. I looked it up. Oh, that filthy granny. Oh, no. And this is, this side tangent, I know, but that's what we do in this show.
Sure.
50 Shades of Grey, as a phenomenon, is astounding to me because the cultural consensus, and I don't agree with this, but the cultural consensus is that pornography is bad. And yet everyone is just trying to make a universal exception for 50 Shades of Grey. Even though I think we can all agree there's probably much better pornography out there.
Yes, I pretty much all agree. I think we can all agree that there's better porn out there than 50 Shades of Grey. Although, people do use...
I wouldn't know. I haven't seen it because repressed as hell, but I'm told.
People do use, books, comics, TV, movies as a way of stepping outside of the bounds of themselves and exploring something that they might not have any direct engagement with. Mm-hmm. And at the very least, 50 Shades of Grey got a whole bunch of people to talk about sex who've potentially never talked about sex before in their life. So maybe that's positive. Have a conversation.
Maybe, but it depends whether you're getting that conversation from and if you're being misled. I think we can all, based on what I know of BDSM and what I dared myself to research, and based on what I know about the books, it's not an accurate portrayal of BDSM at all, and yet it purports to be. And I think people are going to get some very bad... information from that, which is going to lead to some bad decisions of their own.
Oh, they are. And there are a lot of people who live that lifestyle who've come out very strongly against the book. But a lot of them have said, I'm glad we're having the conversation, but let me be an informed member who's actually telling you about what things are like rather than this.
Watch that Maggie Gyllenhaal movie, Secretary. Apparently that's a very good portrayal.
I've never seen that.
I've seen the trailer and I looked at it and I was just like, because this is shortly after 50 Shades of Grey, the whole thing came out that was really terrible. And I saw it and I thought, wait, has that been praised for like an accurate portrayal of BDSM? And apparently it's quite good. Again, I don't know anything about that subculture or that sexual practice. I don't know. But I've heard good things. So check that out. There's always positive things, always negative things. And it was just interesting that how that exception was made for 50 Shades of Grey. And weirdly enough, when comics first get started, the opposite sort of exception was made. Like classic novels like by Edgar Rice Burroughs, like Princess of Mars and Tarzan were hailed as literary classics. But then when you've got like The Shadow or Batman or something like that in a comic form, suddenly it's just kids' entertainment. It was pretty pathetic kids' entertainment at that.
Yeah, no, this idea that just because something has pictures on it, right? And if we think kind of archaeological, anthropologically, pictures are some of the earliest ways that we have of telling stories, from cave paintings that we see, or cave drawings that we see etched all over the world, right? We find them in Australia, Africa, Europe, the Americas. They're all over the place. So for as long as our species has existed, drawings have been a really important way to communicate, to tell stories, to learn about each other and the world that we live in. And comics really can continue in that tradition of helping us learn about the world and the society that we live in, potentially, you know, work through different complicated things that are happening in our individual lives. I mean, we mentioned earlier Batman goes through trauma, but people who've gone through trauma can read that story and potentially relate to it, and potentially
I could dress up like a bat as well.
I mean, no one's stopping you. I'm not saying vigilante justice is a good thing. No. Definitely not. You know,
unless it fails spectacularly in a hilarious way.
Sure.
But a new vigilante came out of the streets today, the Crimson Avenger. He was beaten senseless, left in the gutter, and had his wallet stolen.
Don't be that guy.
No.
You know, we've also got the idea of destiny, which some people can see with Buffy, or even like the Green Lantern, right? Who's something shows
Which
up.
One? There's
Hal
Alan
Jordan.
Scott, there's Hal Jordan, there's John Stewart, not that one. What's his name? Guy Gardner, Carl Rayner, and a couple of others.
Yeah, so I'm thinking Hal Jordan, right? Who lives kind of like a playboy lifestyle, and then all of a sudden shows up, and there's, you know, this responsibility is thrust on him, and he has to learn how to deal with it. And that's another thing that can happen in people's lives.
And it didn't work out well for him if you know his story.
It did not. Maybe not the best example to choose.
He killed everyone. Everyone! So maybe some people can handle that kind of pressure and that kind of rise to fame and, you know, power and responsibility, and some people can't. Which brings us nicely into Spider-Man. His whole thing is power, responsibility, and just a big whole Empire State Building of guilt.
But random chance as well, which is another thing that people can relate to, because prior to Uncle Ben's death, Spider-Man was not doing good things with his powers, right?
He was a wrestler.
A wrestler. He was using those skills for his own benefit, you know, and then following his uncle's death, he realizes that he needs to reevaluate what he's doing and step up and maybe try and be a better person. And I think everyone can relate to having, you know, some random thing happen that makes you think, or maybe changes a decision that you had made, or
I mean, there's three main origins of superpowers in Superman comics, distilling it down quite a bit. Yeah. There's circumstances of birth, Superman, born on Krypton, Kryptonian genes, sent to Earth, that's so... Destiny, and ties into the whole Moses thing. You've got the Green Lantern one, chosen by the ring, I give you my powers. Shazam, I'm Billy Batson, I give you my powers. And then there's chance, Spider-Man, random spider bite, boom, spider powers. And it can affect people in many different ways.
Definitely.
And I mean, it goes back to the whole psychological thing of this idea of locus of control. Some people believe that life is just random chance. It's not really anything we can really do about it, and we just have to ride that cosmic current as far as it'll take us and try not to drown. Some people think very high locus of control. You know, there's some things that may be out of my control, but there's lots of things that I have in my life that I have control over because I've got free will. And there's a big spectrum between the two. And that's the great thing about comics, is that with all these different superheroes, is that there's plenty of opportunity to explore all these concepts from a variety of different viewpoints, which wasn't the case going back to the historical context in the beginning, because for the most part, it was all truth, justice, American way.
Yes.
And that's why Marvel had such a big impact, because it kind of started with Spider-Man again, because with the Fantastic Four, yes, they got the powers by chance, no big birthright, cosmic rays. They were hit by cosmic rays and developed superpowers in the most fantastic ways. No need to fear, they're here. Just call the Four. Fantastic Four. Don't need no more. I had to do it. It's the law. I had to do it. But they kind of. So they kind of subscribe to traditional sort of things. You had sort of the jock character with the thing, the nerdy character, Mr. Fantastic, the quote-unquote female character, Sue Storm. She got better, and the young, hotshot, rebellious teen kid, gee whiz, Human Torch. And so that's like
very creative with the powers and the associated stereotype.
Yeah. Oh my god, sometimes women in society are invisible. I never thought of it like that before. So it was kind of in the mold, but, it has other stuff that set it apart, but not really from a psychological viewpoint. But Spider-Man, he was a teenager, and the CEO of Marvel at the time, can't remember his name, said to Stan Lee, kids are psychics. They can't be heroes, they're psychics. And imagine telling a kid that. You can't be the hero of your own story. You can only be a supporting character in someone else's story. And I imagine in the 50s and 60s, that's how a lot of kids felt. They were coming off this other generation, the part of the baby boomer generation of the parents were the heroes and the survivors and stuff like that. And now all they could really part of me was something that was dubbed countercultural. They were, the outcasts, the ones that were slightly other from society. And then comes along this character, this kid, who's a hero, yes, by chance, and yes, by circumstance, but he's definitely the hero. And it really speaks to that sort of mindset, because initially, Spider-Man was going to be drawn by Jack Kirby, the king, But Stanley wasn't happy with his concept for the character, his design of the character, because he looked too much like an adult, like a traditional hero. That's why he brought on Steve Ditko. That's why he looked more like a kid. He was a bit scrawny, a bit skinny, a bit more, square-jawed.
Yeah. Well, and it's really important for kids to be able to relate because, right, I'm sure most of you listening have either in your childhood taken a towel or a bedsheet and tied it around your neck and run around the house yelling, "I'm Superman." Or...
I did that today. I did that this morning. I took a shower. It's my daily routine.
Excellent. But kids learn through this kind of mimicry, right? And so if you've made a character that kids can relate to, and then they can kind of step into that role and they can play with each other, right? And that ability to step into other roles is also really, really important. It is something that is called the theory of mind, I believe. Scanning notes.
She's got pages written down on a notebook. I've just got a few notes written on my computer here.
Welcome to being an academic, right? Theory of mind, right?
I hope you've got a proper bibliography in that, with proper referencing,
I do. I can even send you links to add to the show notes.
Oh god, when I was at university providing a book of an actual, what was it called? Harvard Standard? Oxford Standard? I can't remember. It was the worst thing. I hated it. Just take me out my word, god damn it. Why do I have to source it? Can't you just believe me? I'm being attacked.
Unfortunately, that's not how academia works.
No.
But yeah, the theory of mind basically states that it's the recognition that other people have different perspectives and that you need to consider those, and the ability to play, right, and to step into these other roles and play out different scenarios and look at the consequences of them is really important. And having a superhero that kids can relate to, that tells them, that invites them into stepping into that world, into thinking about the different decisions that could be made and the different consequences, is so important for developing that consciousness. Yeah,
because there was this psychological experiment I remember being taught about this nature of kids being able to view things from other people's perspectives. So they had a kid, they had a papier-mâché thing of a mountain, there was some details on it, and they had a teddy bear. And they asked the kid, okay, so what can you see? And it's I can see the mountain. Okay, what can Teddy see? I don't know. Daddy's looking right at the same thing you are. What does he see? I don't know. Because they hadn't reached that level of psychological development yet.
Yeah.
And as you say, having a character that kids can relate to, a young character that's not just a psychic, can help develop them. And
super important.
And this is where we get into the concept of the id, the ego, and the superego. That old concept that is still technically relevant, even though most of Freud's stuff just isn't relevant anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, Freud, that little kid isn't into horses. Like, you are making a lot of assumptions here.
Yeah.
Look it up.
Freud is overhyped.
So overhyped. I mean, you're probably more into the Jungian aspects or something like that.
Yeah.
Is it Jungian or Jungian? I don't know.
I think it's Jungian, yeah.
So the id, the ego, the super. So the id is unconscious, subconscious desires. It's primal, it's animalistic, it's all instinctual. The ego is sort of like our reality. It's our conscious mind. It's everything we perceive, everything we know, and it's anytime you have thoughts in your head like, I think this, I like that, I'm not sure about that. That's your ego. And then there's a superego. That's your sort of semi-unconscious sort of. It's been described often in a very colloquial way as sort of like your morality, which, as we all know, can widely vary from person to person. This is wrong. This is good. This is. And the ego is sort of like the balancing act between the id, do this, do that, eat that, then that, and the ego, superego, where it's all, ooh, you can't do that, ooh, you can't do that. And a lot of these character archetypes and all of these characters can easily reflect some of these three sort of states of mind. So, I mean, the id, leaving aside the whole Wonder Woman BDSM thing again.
Yes.
You got characters like the Hulk. The Hulk is a perfect example. He's all
emotion,
rage. He's very much been compared to like a child a lot of the time. Very much reactionary. And then you got on the other, slightly beyond that, you've got characters like Wolverine, who Wolverine's whole character arc in the comics is about is he a man trying to be an animal? Or is he an animal trying to be a man? Ooh. And
when any sort of story arc, right, which are usually going to be part of the origin stories of somebody getting new powers and then learning how to control them, right? Learning how to harness this thing that is uncontrollable can be related to kind of learning how to harness emotions, yourself.
I mean, that can be played very well or very poorly.
Sure.
Going back to The Invisible Woman, there's that scene in the second Fantastic Four movie, the Tim Story Fantastic Four ones, where they're explaining the powers, and Mr. Fantastic is like, okay, so you can bend light around anything, even people, if you could control the emotional state better. I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, Reed, fine, fair enough. You didn't mention the emotional state with Johnny or Ben or any of the other guys. Like, why is the woman the one with the emotional control?
It can be done incredibly poorly. Certainly. And there are a lot of stereotypes, as we talked about when we did the episode on portrayals of women in comics and expectations for female comic characters that are not applied to male comic characters, and it's definitely worth noting.
No, Liefeld, that's not how women look. No.
Yeah.
Stop it. Go back to art school. And so, yeah, there's that aspect, as you say. And then there's, then we get into more like the more traditional aspect of the id, which is like this concept of desire. And then we've got characters like, I'm referencing Marvel characters because that's what I know. People like the Punisher and Deadpool. Deadpool who's all like, do whatever I want. I don't give a fuck. But the Punisher his whole thing is he's acting on instinct that society says is wrong. He is killing people that he thinks deserves to be killed. He's stepping outside society's boundaries.
Yeah, although I think Deadpool is a really interesting character study, along with, I would really classify him as an anti-hero.
Yeah.
Right? Someone who, the intentions might be good, follow through less so. I mean, the more recent Harley Quinn stuff that's been done.
For good or bad.
For good or bad. But there's a lot that looks at, her trying to help out a woman with Alzheimer's who thinks that her kids don't visit her often enough. So she kind of goes and terrorizes the family and gets them to visit more often. And it turns out the lady has Alzheimer's and, and the meeting is saying things that aren't actually true and the family comes once a week. Great intentions. terrible follow through. But they are kind of an interesting class of characters that have evolved because prior to that, and going back to the kind of early days, the golden era, 30, 40s of comics, you have good and you have bad, right? And it's very black and white. And as anyone who's like lived in the world knows, there are a lot of shades of gray, and the anti-heroes provide a really, really interesting vehicle through which to analyze some of those shades of gray.
Is the Punisher right in what he does? Is he wrong? Is it Venom?
Right?
Yeah.
What happens when you don't fall into one of these camps? What's more important, intention or follow through? There's some deeper questions that you can relate to and kind of examine through those story arcs, and a lot of people really, really relate to those anti-hero characters.
Absolutely, and some people relate too much. We won't talk about them. And then you got the ego, and that's more difficult to quantify in terms of a character sort of thing. But my go-to one is probably Iron Man, because this is a guy who, again, looks at the world in a very black and white way and tries to manipulate reality to serve his ideals. He's trying to think, oh, well, should we like this? I'll make it so, even though he's just a man. And it's the ego to like this concept of viewing reality.
But Iron Man is also such a metaphor for control, right? Because he has this shrapnel that ends up in his body, and he wants to control what happens to it, right? He wants to be better than his body. And then in the one of the different character arcs for him, where he becomes an alcoholic, right? And if you relate kind of the policies of AA, which are also about 12 steps of control to beat this alcoholism, but a lot of people start drinking a lot because they feel out of control, and it's a coping mechanism and something that they can do. So I think Iron Man is really interesting from a kind of control perspective as who people relate to and what he says for the desire of the conscious human mind to order and to control things.
Because we've all got ideas about how the world should be and how we want our own lives to be, from the micro to the macro. So it's interesting to see that from the lens of a character who has the ability, at least intellectually, to make some of those things happen. And then you've got the superego, which...
But should he?
But should he, indeed. Then you've got the superhero, this whole morality thing, and that gets back to characters that oftentimes are archaic. They come from the golden age, but continue and persist into the modern era. And those are the ones I find very interesting. You've got things like Captain America, Truth, Justice, the American Way, Batman, bad people, Punch, Superman, Spider-Man again. These very morality-based heroes that you'd think might be irrelevant, but actually probably more relevant than ever.
Yeah, so
depending on how you look at it.
I'm like of two minds of that. So Noah Berlatsky, right, who's just a writer from The Atlantic, who wrote an interesting piece where he kind of referred to those characters and their ability to kind of always do the right thing, truth, justice, the American way, as moral pornography.
Oh.
Right? In that it's something that you can go to and you can kind of get this continual hit of like moral certainty, right?
Which is comforting.
Which it is. It's super comforting, right? And you can go and you can read it, and the bad guy's going to lose and the good guy's going to win, and it's black and white, and you know who you should be voting for. And some of that goes back to the control that I was talking to a minute ago, right? Like human beings as a species, we like categorizing people or categorizing things. As you mentioned, we like order. We have an idea of how things should go.
It's ill-defined. That confuses me. I don't like it.
Exactly. And that often leads to oversimplification, right? The world is black and white, except that it's not. The world is mostly shades of grey. Yeah. And this
I think the world is black and white and grey and blue and pink and purple and...
Yeah.
Because I don't like when people say the world is just grey, it's all grey, because, no, we know for a fact that some things are wrong and some things are right. But then we get into moral relativity, which is a sinkhole in terms of both psychology, anthropology, and just general societal awareness. But I do find it fascinating because of that. It's annoying. It's just like, I don't want to talk about you, but I want to talk about you.
It is definitely a good way to lose an afternoon or several going down that particular path. But comics are nice because they're certain. Good guy wins, bad guy doesn't. It's easy to determine who is who. Oftentimes, particular colors will be used to determine who's good or who's bad. For example, lime green in Disney. I realize Disney isn't really superheroes, but I like Disney. All of the villains in Disney, right? Like 90% of them survived by lime green. Oh, there's lime green. That person must not be good. But one of the problems with this moral certainty, I think, is that it can trick people into wanting to see that in the real life. And that can become problematic in politics, for example, where if you've got kind of a strong man type character who stands up and says, oh, it's simple and I can solve it and it's not going to be hard. And it's nice. It's comforting to look at someone and say, they know what's up and they can fix it and I don't need to do anything. I don't need to change my life.
This is the big thing with American politics.
Yes,
especially,
and I am American.
Yes.
But it's reassuring, right?
Yeah.
And because we see these characters who we think of as good and who can say, oh yes, this is simple and I will fix it. And then they do.
Or don't.
But oftentimes they do in the comics.
Yes.
You know, maybe not in the issue, but by the end of the arc.
Absolutely.
And I think that people like that certainty, right? That like hit of serotonin, dopamine. I feel good, and they want to transfer that over
because it
to their
simplifies
world
this
life.
chaotic world.
Right. And the world is chaotic, right? The world is complicated. And I think that
in terms of alignment, the world is a chaotic neutral.
Yes. But I think it's important that we deal with that. And I do sometimes worry, and I've seen a couple pieces from other individuals as well that worry about kind of the impact that superheroes could potentially be having on reasoning and decision making. We talked a lot about like the potential good and that children can step outside of themselves and
Because
play
that's the
moral
thing.
and
I hate when
ethical
people
dilemmas.
talk about the superhero genre like, oh, it does this and oh, it does that. Like, it's just like any other genre. It's like sci-fi or action or romance. It's not the genre, it's how you write it. Because like romantic comedies, for example, I love romantic comedies, but I know full well it is a heads or tails scenario as to whether this would be a lovely story about interesting people and their romantic journey and utter psychopaths who destroy everyone's around them lives.
Yes. Right.
So it's about how you do it. And sometimes comics do present the black and white, good versus evil, good wins, everyone's happy, yay mentality. Sometimes they don't, and it can turn out very well. Like Captain America, for example, he hated the fact that he was being used as a prop for the American government in the 1970s, and basically saying that he represented America and therefore represented the government. And he disagreed with the government on several things. It's like, no, I stand for the spirit of America, what America should be, maybe what it's never been, but what it could one day be if we just get our acts together. I'm not going to be used as a prop anymore. I'm ditching the costume. I'm becoming this character called Nomad that nobody cared about.
Right. But let me be the beacon of what could be rather than what necessarily is. And I think that
Superman, for example, famously, I think it was on the news, he disowned his American citizenship. Like, I think Clark Kent retained that, obviously, because otherwise, where's he going to go?
Right.
But Superman just says, like, I want to represent the country and the people, but I can't represent the governing body, which is amazing, and people got quite a reaction to that.
But be a beacon for the whole world, not just a country.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because humanity isn't just one country or one town or one city or one group of people. Like, it's everyone. We're all interconnected, right? We're all related
and yet we're
to one
so
another.
tribal as well. It's that tribal mentality. I honestly think, I don't know, again, not an anthropologist, not a psychologist, but I think we've never lost that mentality. We've always been going to have that mentality of we're the good guys, the people over the hill, they're the bad guys, even though there's just like a mile difference between us.
Yeah, and comic books can kind of examine that in a really interesting way with the introduction of characters like the swamp creature, or
Do
Alien.
you mean Swamp Thing?
Swamp Thing, yes.
Yeah.
I apologize. I haven't actually read that particular comic book.
Swamp Thing. You are amazing. But your first season was cancelled because of budgetary reasons. Yeah.
Inevitably.
Yeah.
But Swamp Thing, which I've never seen. Or the introduction of aliens or, superhuman beings, but anything that's kind of other, right? And there are certainly others in the world. Like humans like categories, right? We categorize ourselves, we categorize those people around us.
On everything from appearance to outlooks to opinions and ideologies. And you can come up with some great allegories for examining this concept of the other. That's a big thing. So the big ones would be like the X-Men and Doom Patrol, the Marvel and DC respectively. The X-Men have been used as an allegory for civil rights, for the LGBTQIA plus community. Doom Patrol, just as anyone who's sort of like physically different from the differently abled, to people who maybe have like psychological conditions or physiological conditions. And really they could be used as an allegory for any marginalized, oppressed group at all. But it's interesting that people had that mindset going into the creation of these things.
Yeah, although it's also interesting because we all have reactions to these different categories, right? So I'm very pro LGBTQ.
Good.
Right?
You're in the right city for it.
Yes, definitely. And it's Pride. Or was Pride, I guess it's
this is going to go out. Actually, we're recording this on the 1st of July, so Pride is over. Like, we missed it by a day.
Yeah.
Well, we you know what? We got the, top 10 LGBTQIA plus superhero list out at the beginning of the month. So, we beat you to it.
But, I have very positive feelings. But there are, unfortunately, people in the world who have negative feelings about that group of people. But when you do the other as a category, that we don't have these kind of personal or social biases, we can remove some of the, I guess, like complicating factors to talk about more of the psychology or like the moral or ethical truths behind being inclusive or trying to be divisive with Superman, who's an alien.
Yeah, I mean,
should he be allowed to be on this planet? Should we ostracize him because he's different?
He's a great example of as a great allegory or metaphor for the dreamer kids in America.
Yes, but because we can remove some of the personal biases by naming that group and making it a real world example, we can have some of those like higher moral discussions. And if you can get people to think differently on that abstract level, it can trickle down. And okay, so you've already kind of started getting them to think differently, which may cause them to think slightly differently about these other categories. So it can be really, really, really useful.
Because like I've always said it, children's stories inform the people they're going to be. It doesn't necessarily shape or manipulate or set in stone what they're going to be, but it does inform who you're going to be. I am who I am because of the material I read when I was a kid and growing up. Not entirely, but partially because of that. Because I read Spider-Man, because I read X-Men.
When you look at brain development, right, that happens at certain points, and it's relatively genetically mandated, right? And it's not everyone like, exactly at 30 days old you're going to do
okay,
this.
children, where do you see yourself currently on Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Exactly. But, when we start seeing, like the development of the frontal cortex, like the things that we're reading or being exposed to at that period are really, really important for shaping how that portion of our brain evolved, right? One of the reasons why when we look at teenagers that we talk about like moody teenagers, angsty teenagers, it's because we're actually looking...
teenagers scare the living shit out of me.
Yes, but you're actually looking at a period of neurological growth, right? Where things are changing and neural pathways are being rewired.
And then we bring endocrinology into all of that, the hormones, geez.
Yeah. But what you're exposed to when that kind of wiring is happening is important for establishing those pathways. So in some ways, and my personal opinion, most ways, the material that we're exposed to as children and into kind of the adolescence, young adulthood period is super, super important, because you can start having an effect as things are starting to grow and develop, or continuing to grow and develop.
Both for positive and negative ways.
Right. So this idea of like kids literature, children's literature not being serious enough or not being impactful, like, no, it's super
The
impactful.
opposite.
We should be talking about
It's
it
more important, I would say, than adult material. Because adult films and adult comics and adult stories, with big quotation marks, adult.
Yeah.
Maybe it can inform someone, but doesn't have to, because we never stop learning and we never stop growing. But in terms of psychological development, we're set pretty much. Like, all the necessary materials are there in our brain. The only thing that can really change are our opinions and perspectives and outlooks.
Well, we can, yeah, but kind of the neurological structures that grow at a prescribed rate are grown.
Yeah, exactly. And it's important to make sure we give children's media I've always said this, and I will always say it, the appropriate deference and the appropriate weight that it needs. And going beyond representation and just the pure quality of the story, Marvel had the Marvel way of writing. It had the way of, like, we want the dialogue to be naturalistic. Stan Lee, he went to I bring up Marvel's history a lot because I recently read a Stan Lee biopic comic book, Stan Lee graphic novel, which I would recommend to anyone. It's a bit, I don't want to say it's a bit like idolizing of the man, but let's be honest, it's Stan Lee. It's hard not to idolize him. But he went to a cartoon company with the idea of getting, like Marvel cartoons getting started, and the executive was just like, oh, so you want to make cartoons with us? And he's just like, yeah. It's like, so you like our cartoons? Well, I mean, the animation is great. I love the animation, he said. But, and this is in the comic, bear in mind, so it's second hand. He said, but I don't like the dialogue. It's very stiff, it's very unnaturalistic, very unrealistic, and we want the dialogue, especially for kids, to be more naturalistic. And the executive said, we don't do talking heads. No, I'm not pitching talking heads. I just want the dialogue to be more naturalistic. We don't do talking heads. No, that's not what I'm saying. Ad nauseum. And yeah, that's from an independent, possibly fictional source. But that was the kind of mentality with, like, He-Man, Masters of the Universe, all the Filmation stuff, and even when they brought in cartoons from other countries like Japan and they dubbed them. They really dumbed down the dialogue and introduced PSAs and stuff, and that was the mentality, and it really wasn't effective. And Marvel, they have their own problems with the cartoons. Oh yeah, sure, I'll surrender, Sentinel. Not. Bzz. No. But it did develop, and pretty quickly, our cartoons are becoming much, much more advanced. I swear to God, I mean, I like the cartoons I watched when I was a kid. But the amount in terms of how the stories they present, the complexity and the maturity of the characters has jump-started in a huge way. So, like, when we were kids, we probably had, like, things like Avatar: The Last Airbender, even though I never watched that when I was a kid.
I mean, I was not a kid when that came out.
Yeah, so it kind of missed us. But kids had that, and then it went on and on with Gravity Falls, Steven Universe. In fairness to Disney, a lot of their cartoons are really, really good right now, as far as I'm aware.
I mean, even Young Justice, right?
Yeah.
It just had this huge, broad appeal that was canceled because it appealed to too many people. Like, that was a dumb decision.
Okay, so too many people like our thing and it's really successful, so let's get rid of it.
We were trying to market it to, 7 to 11-year-old boys, but,
everyone
young
liked it.
female children and parents liked watching it, and because we can't just market it to this one people and it got complicated, so
marketing and demographics are the
sake.
death of creativity, I swear to God. Obviously, yeah, if you can target an audience, fine, because then you're all but guaranteed an audience. I get that. But when you have something that has broad appeal, I was always led to believe...
Run with it!
Yeah, that's the greed, that's the dream, that's the gold mine. Why wouldn't you? And, because... Here's the thing, I think as a society, you could always say this is a generational thing, but society is, we're expanding our collective cultural unconsciousness in terms of the things we're aware of. Kids becoming much more active in topical, political and cultural discussions with the advent of the internet age and Twitter and stuff.
Although it's also interesting because a lot of that is tapping into this like collective unconscious, right? And the stories that we're talking about. And a collective unconscious is kind of defined as the hidden thoughts, fears, feelings, and desires that are experienced by all people no matter time and place.
Yeah.
So
The zeitgeist.
yeah, 2,000 years ago, people still maybe feared not being accepted or whether or not they were going to be safe if they were going on a trip through a densely wooded area or, worrying about love or death of family members, right? There are all of these things that, yes, we're engaging with more, and the internet has made a lot more accessible, but these are themes that transcend time and place.
Absolutely, and that fear of not being accepted is a big thing, and that's especially prevalent in the I don't know if you call this community, but for the sake of this argument, I'm going to call it a community. The mentally ill community, the neurodivergent community. Neuroatypical, even better. I don't know all the words. I'm sorry, keepers. I'm learning. I'm trying to teach myself. I'm learning, and it comes into the whole perception of mental illness. More and more, we're discovering the true ramifications of mental illness and how you can and can't and definitely shouldn't approach it, both in terms of just day-to-day interactions in your life, but also in representation in the media, because you could always make the argument that various characters throughout history exhibited signs of this mental illness or that mental illness, or, Sherlock Holmes might be autistic, or
Armchair psychology,
basically. But more and more, mental illness becoming actually properly and represented and named with superheroes. So some examples are Hank Pym has been diagnosed bipolar. Jessica Jones she's got PTSD. Rorschach in Watchmen, he's got a personality disorder. That's how he's written. Legion, he's got DID. Scarlet Witch had a psychotic break in the Avengers that caused her to rip reality a new one. And the big example for me, again in Marvel, is this character called the Sentry. He's not around anymore, but he was around for one in the 2000s. And this is a character that is supposed to be the most powerful superhero in the Marvel world. But everyone forgot about him due to various shenanigans I'm not going to mention. But it turns out this character, in addition to being the most powerful superhero on the face of the planet, has a boatload of phobias and schizophrenia. He's not a stable person, and it made for a very interesting character, I feel. But that's the thing, you see. It's the balance of having a character and having a mentally ill prop in your story,
Well, there's been some discussion that I've heard about, and this is DC, because I realize we will never get over this. You like Marvel, I like DC.
Why am I surrounded by DC lovers everywhere I fucking go?
Because we're intelligent. We know what's up. But there has been talk about a lot of Batman's villains, right? The Batman doesn't actually.
I like the villains. I like Batman's.
But a lot of them,
most of them are in a mental asylum where they get locked up.
Right, and the kind of care that they're receiving is not great. But Mr. Freeze loses his wife, right? Deals with trauma differently than Batman did. But the Batman doesn't necessarily do enough to take that into consideration, and potentially doing rehab.
The Riddler is a great example for me, because the Riddler has OCD and he has a narcissistic personality disorder. He has a desire to be the most smartest person in the room and to prove that he's the smartest person in the room. But here's the thing, though. If you took away his psychological problems, he could actually be a very great hero. He could actually be the smartest person in the room. And there was a point in the comics where he got I don't know what exactly happened to him, but he gave up being a villain and started being a hero and was actually pretty effective at it. And he calmed down a bit. And then they reversed the decision because DC hates change.
Well, so and I think that particular story arc is actually really interesting for two reasons. One, because I believe early on in that story arc, he does have an interaction with Bruce Wayne. And Bruce Wayne knows who he is. And I can't remember whether he gives him a job or rigs up a fake contest and gives him money, but the Riddler being, the Riddler and having this record that's associated with his name was finding it very hard to get a job.
Yeah. Imagine that.
Right. And so and this ties into a lot of the issues that we're having in the US with recidivism rates, whereas if you get out of prison and you've got this huge stigma and you can't get a job, what's left to you if you need to provide for yourself or provide for your family? And Bruce Wayne, in kind of providing this opportunity and this ability to have some financial solvency, allows the Riddler to step back from being the Riddler. And people have also talked about the fact that when he kind of goes back to it, that may actually be a manifestation of his OCD and his
I thought it was because he got a brain tumor. I may be getting that wrong.
Was it? But so I mean, I've heard people talk about the fact that it could be the obsessiveness of being the smartest man in the room, of being better than Batman.
And as we all know, very intelligent people are never arrogant about it. Jobs.
Yeah, but there is something worth stating that mental health is often a lifelong journey, right?
Yeah.
And you have ups and you have downs, and maybe things get better, and then you have something that makes them get worse for a while.
And that's where we get into the whole neuroatypical sort of thing. Because now we've got superheroes who are autistic. A big example would be the recent Power Rangers movie. I think we got the first autistic, at least live action on cinema portrayal of an autistic superhero, which is a major thing. I don't know many autistic people who would be especially infused about that, but then I don't know every autistic person. So it helps to have that sort of representation, and also just to name it, because so many people for so many years tried to put these characters, but they weren't allowed to say they're autistic or they're bipolar or they're whatever for whatever reason, marketing. And so to have
making people feel like they're not alone.
They're not the other; they are us.
Valuable. Yeah,
it's a huge thing. And as you say, it could go for any marginalised community. But considering the fact that mental illness and how we treat it, we are so far behind.
Oh, we're terrible at it.
Yeah. In the UK, in the US, it's insane. And we're getting better. But it doesn't make up for years of what amounted to essentially ignorance, unacceptance, and often torture.
Yeah, and fear.
Fear
Fear of the other. And no, the representation and naming of the people and making that group inclusive is so important.
Yeah. It's not just the idea of it can be used for character development, but also it can be used for rising above it, or it can be used for just living with it. A great example would be Jessica Jones. I haven't seen the third season yet because I kind of stopped caring. I'm sorry. But a big thing with her in the first season for her was her living with PTSD. She doesn't get over it, because some people, depends what it, some people can get over it, some people can move past it, some people get snowed under it, and some people just learn to live with it.
Yeah.
And that's their existence. And speaking coming from a military family, I can tell you, that's fucking important. And so to show a character that she's just trying to cope and live with what is now her life. Sometimes she does it well, sometimes she does not. But you know what? People sometimes work with it well and don't. So,
right. But it's really great to be able to look at characters, right, who maybe have a lot of great things, right, a lot of super things about them, but who still struggle with some of these, whether it be mental health, anxieties, trauma,
or just life in general.
They're flawed, right? Their life, and something that you can look at and aspire to or be motivated by, or even great people, or people that we perceive as great, people we perceive as super, struggle. And I think that we don't do a particularly good job in our society of showcasing that. And I don't think that things like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter have helped, where everyone is putting the highlight reel of their life online, and then everyone who's sitting and seeing it is saying like, oh, this person's life looked really great and mine isn't. And what's happening is that you're comparing your behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel, and it makes people feel insufficient. So
I know I've done that a lot.
Yeah. Oh, it's super common. I mean, they've done some.
I don't have my own television show where I talk about films yet. It's not like I'm only 27.
But yeah, having these examples of people who maybe have aspects of their life that are great or super and can do these incredible things, but have some of the same struggles. Again, just making people feeling like they're not alone is super, super important.
So, I mean, we've talked about historical context, we've talked about mental illness, we've talked about psychological theorems, we talked about perception and how it relates to our society. Have we missed anything out?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the one thing that I've also thought about some myself, as well as seen some articles on, because academic and I research everything.
And I just research some things.
But one kind of concern that has occasionally popped up, which relates a little bit to what I was talking to earlier with kind of the moral pornography and potentially liking people who say, oh yes, it's great, or I can solve this problem easily, and going with that character, is also the bystander effect, which most people understand or are aware of because of the murder of Kitty Genovese.
Which you may know from Watchmen. That was referenced in Watchmen as a sort of... That was used as a... Rorschach is getting psychoanalyzed in prison, and he explains, like, the story of Kitty Genovese. Genovese?
I think it's Genovese. It's also in Boondock Saints. But she was a woman who was murdered in New York City, and there were a lot of people who saw it, heard it,
stared out of the window at it.
And because it was in public and lots of people saw it, everyone kind of assumed that someone else would do something about it and that they don't need to do something about it.
It's that line from The Simpsons. She's going to destroy the thing. Someone stop her. Doesn't move.
Right. And every single one of us has the potential to stop her, to place the phone call, right? I'm not suggesting that you should go put yourself in like physical danger, but anyone could have called the cops.
Yeah.
You know?
No, they watched.
Right. Because you expect someone else to deal with it. And sometimes when we have these superheroes, I do worry that people expect that some superhero is going to show up and step in and say, be better, or something, and like...
Or just solve the problem.
Right. And it's our problem.
Yeah.
We have to solve it. We have to step up, whether that means...
You want someone to be the superhero? Be the superhero yourself.
Right. Be the change you want to see in the world. Whether that means, stepping in when you see
I'm
bullying.
starting with the man in the mirror. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Calling out coworkers who are saying inappropriate things. Whatever it is. Again, like...
I mean, this is the thing that contrasts greatly and conflicts greatly with British culture. Because our mentality is, oh no, something's happening. Oh, that's bad. That's wrong. I know that's wrong. Should I say something? I should say something. Oh no, I better not. Oh no. And I'm guilty of that myself. I remember I used to have this job. I won't say what the job was, but I used to have this job where we went door to door. It was a charity fundraising job. I won't say what the charity was. I didn't say what the organisation was. And we were trying to get people to sign up to donate money. And...
It's so hard.
It is very hard. It was the hardest job I've ever had, and I hated it. Like the charity, hated the actual physical job. And the manager I had at the time, was the only manager I had at the time, he been doing this job for years and years and years, and he was very good at it. And he was talking about all these jobs he had and all over the UK. This was still in Edinburgh. And then he said something. He said, I used to work in London. I used to do a lot in sort of like the Jewish areas of London. And he said, oh, do you know what's a great way if you ever end up in those sort of areas, Scott, if it's to get people to sign up, is say, oh, you probably couldn't afford it anyway. And I was like, what the fuck? But here's the thing, Capers, and I'm very ashamed of this. I didn't say anything. I did not call him out on it. I wanted to, and I looked shot, and maybe he got the message from that. But I could have said, that's not appropriate. Like, oh, I wouldn't say that. I could have said something, but I didn't. I just kind of kept it to myself and just like, okay, moving on. Because I've been taught by my parents and by society in general, like, not to rock the boat, not to cause a lot of fuss. And I'm fine doing that when someone says, oh, I like this one superhero. How dare you? When something says something anti-Semitic, I was waging an internal war with myself. Do I say something or not? And I wish I'd said something.
And it's hard, and everyone has a moment or several in their life like that. And some of it goes to kind of the tribal nature of humans that you mentioned, that like we like to belong, and calling out, especially a supervisor, right, or someone who is
this was a person who had authority over me,
over you, is
and
really
I just
difficult,
started as well,
and can have like negative repercussions on your job, and that is a concern that a lot of people have, and it's a valid concern. But I also think that if we want the world to be a better place, we have to do something about it.
Yeah. Because maybe then he might have said, "Oh, that's a good point, Scott. That was a bit anti-Semitic," and maybe he could have internalized that and become better.
Well, you know what?
Or not. But
even if that person doesn't internalize, if you make them think before they say something like that again, and maybe they don't ever say anything like that again, other people aren't going to hear it and say, he said it, so it's okay for me to say it or for me to think it, right? Yeah. So even if you don't change that one person's mind, you just make them feel socially uncomfortable, so they're not going to say it again. That can have like a snowball effect.
Yeah, and I probably should have said something, because that same manager went on to sexually harass several of my co-workers. So, not a nice guy overall.
People who are discriminatory, right? Racist, sexist, anti-Semitic, xenophobic, the list of isms is long. They're usually not isolated. No. Unfortunately.
It's learned behavior.
Yeah. And anytime someone says, check yourself,
Check your privilege, and that's it's something that's come up quite a lot, especially with regards to superheroes. The bigger thing is with Batman. Batman goes around and he punches muggers and supervillains and stuff like that. And for a while, everyone thought that's great. And then someone had the bright idea to step and say, why does he just use his fabulous riches to enact social change rather than getting a new Batmobile every 6 months? Like, that does not come cheap. Social programs, like, he's been doing this for years, and Gotham is still a fucking cesspit. I'm surprised anyone still lives there. I mean, having, like, multiple, like, there's been a mass migration from, like, Detroit and places. That's like a real-life equivalent of Gotham, except with less, scarecrows and plant ladies. So, maybe, I don't know, I've never been. So, like, why doesn't he just do that? And the argument is, oh, he does. He does charity stuff and, the like, but
how often does he run away from charity events to go put on the suit?
Yeah.
Right? Where are his values? What is he...
And it's always like galas and regattas and stuff like that. It's just like, okay, great, you're attending a party and they're probably worthwhile causes, but you keep doing these things and nothing seems to be getting better. And maybe that's a bit of a fallacy, but I think it's a legitimate criticism.
No, it is. And one of the problems with Batman is that I think at his core, I don't think that he believes that the system can work or that the system will work, and that he therefore needs to be above it or in addition to. And if
I need to be the hero the city deserves.
Right. And if you have the belief that a system won't work, you're not invested in trying to change it or make it better or ensure that it works for all people equally. And that's...
Maybe because it doesn't make you like a revolutionary, or it doesn't make you your own personal changer of the establishment or something. It just makes you apathetic or disaffected.
Right. Well, and Batman, and going back to, people have talked about Batman not considering kind of the mental health of some of his nemesi. I'm not sure the...
Nemesis.
Yes, the pluralization of that. But... why do people engage in crime?
Instead a variety of sociological and psychological reasons.
Right. But instead of just trying to punish people for the action, why don't you try and make the social change that would break the cycle?
Yeah. It's been parodied multiple times. There's the classic sketch of just like Batman swoops in and breaks like someone's leg. And it was, I think it was like a Dorkly. I don't know if you ever watched this. So this animated sort of things. Batman swoops in, breaks like this guy's leg, just like justice is served. And the guy's like, "Oh God, just kill me." What? Just kill me. I would never kill anyone. No, you have to, because then my wife can get the life insurance. What? You don't understand. The only reason I turned to crime was because of our abject poverty. And now with all the medical bills, because America, there's no way that I'm ever going to be able to support them, even if I have crime, and no one's going to hire me, and no one's going to take me on as a henchman. This is like my only thing, so just like kill me and save my family. And he's got a point. Like he's done.
Relativism! It's a black pit.
Imagine that, like, the satirical YouTube video nails the psychology and the sociology of Batman better than all the movies.
Yeah.
It's real.
I know a lot of people love Batman. He's my least favorite character.
I do not. I care much more about his villains, if I'm perfectly honest.
Yeah.
I find them
me
interesting.
Too. The anti-heroes in that story. I'm a big Harley fan.
Who isn't? Who isn't these days?
Fair.
Spice has now, at the mention of Harley Quinn, gotten up and is pacing around, just like...
Looking at me very expectantly. He's heard me talk about Harley Quinn before. Understands the reference.
Oh God, is she going on about Harley Quinn again? I don't know why I gave your lovely little female dog this weird, like, Harvey Firestein voice.
I don't know.
Oh God, I'm just done.
Back to nap time.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, is there anything else you'd like to talk to in regards to psychology and superheroes? Because I'm tapped, if I'm honest.
Yeah, no, I think I'm also pretty tapped, gotten through my notes. Always an accomplishment.
We've got so many notes. I think we've come at a great spread. We're going to talk about sociological issues, the psychological issues, representation, allegories, and it's difficult to talk about the psychology, the science, as opposed to the literary context, because that's where my skill lies. But it is interesting because, in the same way that any media is going to be interesting when we took the psychological factor into it, it's because we're doing this because this is a superhero podcast. We talk about superheroes here. That's what we do when we're not talking about fucking Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But also, it's the big genre right now. It's so popular, and that's caused a bit of backlash that I just don't give a shit about. Like, there's so many superhero movies these days. Then watch something else. No one's forcing you. Jeez, fuck. Like, there's lots of horror movies out these days. I don't watch that because I'm a cowardly cream custard who couldn't eat the mustard. But there's a thing for everyone. Genre is not the problem. But it's analysing from a psychological... I think more people need to do this because it's going to inform how they view the world. That's what we're saying.
When even the people who say, there are so many superhero movies out right now or coming out or planned or, why is this kind of inundated the space? Ask yourself why, right? What is it about superhero movies that everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people connect to? Right? Why
do we idolise the man in the red cape or relate to the man in the red and blue striped pajamas?
Yeah. Why is it important? What are people getting from it? And it isn't just kind of a fringe group. It's people who don't read comics. Ask them who their favorite superhero is. And they're probably going to give you the name of someone who is in a film, but they know something.
And as we mentioned before in the show, there's more superheroes out there outside of the whole red and blue tights sort of thing.
There's more than just DC and Marvel.
There's more than just DC and Marvel.
So many amazing small press.
Small press, but also like as a concept, superheroes. Hercules.
Who is an original Greek demigod.
Yeah. And then there's people like... slightly more traditional, like Astro Boy and stuff like that. I mean, he was coming out at the same time Superman was. He's Japan's Superman / Mickey Mouse. And really too... Because Osamu Tezuka, I can't remember his name, is sort of like Japan's Walt Disney. Mm-hmm. And he was very much influenced by Walt Disney. And... it's an interesting idea because this is a superhero, but it's also a robot, but he's also a boy, think about that. In the 1940s, they got that before even Marvel did.
Right. I mean, the intersectionality there.
Yeah, that's the thing, and it's because to be superhuman, I think, is to be human, whether you're larger than life or very much relatable. It all links back to us as people and how we perceive the world. And you can make that argument with any sort of literary character, but as we say, we talk about superheroes, so that's what we're going to fucking do. And it's important to remember that psychological factor, because we could all use, I think, in this day and age, a little bit more of self-awareness.
Definitely.
Or just awareness in general. And I think on that note, we're going to end this show. God damn, we're a bunch of smarty pants, aren't we? Thank you very much, Chelsi, for joining me today.
Always fun. Happy to be here.
And if you enjoy the show, Capers, please tell your friends, shout it from the rooftops! And if you haven't already, go back and listen to some of our other super episodes, like the last time you were on, check that out. Last time Chelsi was on, check that out. And you can listen to the show on iTunes, Podbean, YouTube, Spotify, or at podcapers.com. We have a Patreon. Check out the rewards. Patreon.com/AP2HYC. If you want to get in touch with us, suggest show topics, or maybe come on the show yourself, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at AP2HYC, or email us at podcapers@AP2HYC.com. Thank you very much to Dan Harris for our logo, the lovely microphone, the red and blue 3D glasses, those are mine. And thank you for listening. This has been Podcapers, the official podcast of a place to hang your cape. Cue the music!